Hey everyone, it is late at night and I am Norman. The dive watch. They are ubiquitous. If you collect watches, even if you don't, if you wear watches, you probably own one. I recently came across a Windup watch shop article that was the inspiration for this video. They went deep into the history of dive watches and it was very intriguing. So let's do a deep dive into dive watches. Let us begin. So this article began with a great discussion about decompression sickness. So they were talking about how nitrogen and other elements that divers breathe behave differently under intense pressure. So if you surface too fast, it's not good. And they also explained why you can't breathe pure oxygen because it becomes toxic after a while. So decompression sickness is something that divers have to live with. And the idea of a dive watch is you're able to know how much time you have so you can plan for your slow ascent. Early dive watches. Combined with a set of US Navy tables and a reliable depth gauge, the dive watch enabled divers to explore depths of over 200 feet safely. In practice, its use is simple. Upon entering the water, the rotating bezel is moved to the current position of the minute hand. That is it. From there, the diver monitors the passing time to stay within their no deco limit. The tables are then consulted once out of the water to plan a repeat dive, if desired, based on the bottom time and a corresponding surface interval. However, a few issues could occur. The modern standard of a unidirectional bezel was not standard. Many early bezels were friction fit, meaning they could be knocked out of position. On a dive pushing no compression limits, this could prove potentially hazardous if one were not paying close attention. And back in the day when deep sea divers wore these diving suits, they were referred to as hard hat divers. And they would actually tuck their pocket watch inside their helmet so they could see the time. And early on, dive watches were simply watches that had higher than usual water resistance levels. There wasn't yet a vision for what a dive watch looks like. So we see pieces that are absolutely dress watch looking that were actually dive watches, or at least for swimming with. In 1926, Rolex bought the patent for the Oyster watch case, featuring a hermetic seal. On October 7, 1927, an English swimmer, Mercedes Gleitz, attempted to cross the English Channel with a new Rolex Oyster hanging around her neck by a ribbon on this swim. After more than 10 hours in the chilly water, the watch remained sealed and kept good time throughout. And I've mentioned this next watch in a previous video. They were absolutely gorgeous. Omega SA is credited as the creator of the world's first industrially produced diving watch intended for commercial distribution, the rectangular Omega Marine, with a patented double sliding and removable case, introduced in 1932. And in the early days, there was Panerai. Following a request made by the Royal Italian Navy in September 1935 for a luminous underwater watch for divers, Panerai offered the radio mirror. Underwater timepieces in 1936. These watches were made by Rolex for Panerai. And then there were a bunch of watches that were referred to as canteen watches. The Second World War put dive technology on a Darwinian fast forward that led to the development of frogman units, underwater demolition teams, and many subunits which were essentially crude steerable torpedoes. For most of the war, if watches were worn by frogmen units, they tended to be simply high water resistant watches. In addition, there were a plethora of so-called canteen watches, made, among others, by the then USA-based Hamilton Watch Company, which had screw-down crown covers, rather like the lid of a thermos bottle. The Golden Age. The start of the golden age of diving, recreational at least, is sometimes dated to a 1953 issue of National Geographic, which featured a story about Cousteau's underwater archaeology off Marseille. The story, it said, created huge demand for aqualungs and diving gear, and the other equipment that followed, notably underwater cameras. Following the 50 Fathoms, Submariner, Zodiac Seawolf, and Omega Seamaster came a wave of lesser diving pieces, many of which are now called skin diver watches, basic and inexpensive, water-resistant to between 100 and 200 meters, and domed with coin-edge bezels. By the end of the 1960s, the style would be ubiquitous. And here's an example of a Rolex Submariner from 1954. The Trieste bathysphere also has the distinction of being one of the few submarines to wear a watch. A specially designed Rolex Deep Sea attached to its exterior. As a dive watch, this Deep Sea is of debatable utility. What with its massive overbuilt case and half-hemisphere crystal, it's just not meant to be worn, even considering today's appetite for oversized watches. But as proof of a concept, that a dive watch can be built to tolerate the worst the ocean depths could throw at it. But its greatest triumph was in 1960, when it accomplished the Deep Boat, on the record dive into the abyss of the Challenger Deep to a depth of 10,916 meters. And this is an image of the Rolex Deep Sea 1960. The modern dive watch. Another watch, launched at virtually the same moment, also remains an icon of the dive watch in its first modern form. In 1952, Commander Robert Wallobier of the French Special Forces Combat Swimmers Unit was given the task of designing a purpose-built dive watch that could operate at a depth of 50 fathoms, or 91.44 meters. There were no commercially available watches that fit Wallobier's requirements, and so the French officer found himself in discussion with Blancpain, Rayville SA in Switzerland to launch the design in France. Blancpain signed a deal with Lip in 1953 to distribute the watch, which finally went on sale in 1954. So the 50 Fathoms was the first watch to have the features that we identify today as dive watch characteristics. The rotating bezel being one of those. Some of my favorite contemporary watches include the Baltic Aquascaphe, which I've actually owned 2 of, and they're just gorgeous dive watches. I feel like maybe I should get one again, since I sold the other 2. They are really great looking. And I do love my Armida A11 dive watch that I still own. It's just a brilliant little watch. And of course the Serica. And some interesting dive watches that I encountered during the process of preparing this video. I found this Certina DS Super PH500M. I like the crosshairs. I also found this rotary C-Matic GS05430/06. And this brand was new to me. The Abingdon Company Marina Dive Watch. And the Bull of a Devil Diver. So great. The blue colorway on this Helios. This is a fair wind, and that blue is just so cool. This video was made possible by articles that were put out there by Windup Watch Shop, Revolution Watch, Watchdoctor, Wikipedia, Esquire, and Better Magazine. And links to all of those articles are in the show notes below. Thanks for watching.